Hello, hello. It's Elizabeth Busby here, the Director of Programs for the Theology of the Body Institute. Thank you so much for joining me for my Discerning Marriage podcast. I am thrilled to bits about my guest today, Mary and Jerry Lenaburg. We split them up. So you get Jerry right now. You will get Mary in other episodes. Actually, probably Mary's are going to drop first. So you've probably already seen them. But they came together and we got to have lunch together. And I'm freaking out because they're internet famous and I am all about that life. So anyways, I'm really excited. And I'm going to have Jerry talk about his discernment story, which I love discernment stories. And I actually got Mary's discernment story on my old school podcast back in the day, it was during COVID lockdown. So it was a while ago. And I love when I get one person's version of the story and then I can have the spouse on, because even though they got married, their discernment stories are different. They're different people. They have different journeys. The Lord works in different ways. So it is always such a delight to me when I get the other person on the podcast. So anyways, this is Jerry Lenaburg. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, how you doing? I'm happy to be here.
I'm so delighted. So he married the incredible Mary Lenaburg. Who,
actually, that's the other way.
I was going to say, did Mary marry the incredible Jerry?
Yeah, she actually married me.
Did your rhyming names influence this? Just let's do a spoiler.
No, but we figured early on that we're Mary and Jerry.
Yeah,
and it's really cute, so we're easy to remember. Yeah.
So cute. I always do kind of wonder, does that weigh in? Are you our names fit really well together? Anyway, my maiden name was Forever Long, and I would be lying if I said I didn't choose people to date who had short last names, because I did do that. Right. So I didn't know if maybe you wanted someone who rhymed with you, and then you were a Hallmark couple. We were just talking about Hallmark movies. Jerry loves them. He loves Hallmark movies.
Yep, just like kidney stones. They too shall pass.
You guys, we're going to have so much fun. Okay, thank you so much for coming on my show, Jerry. We just met, but because I love Mary from my internet interactions with her.
I get that a lot. Oh, you're Mary's husband. Yes. Oh, you're Courtney's dad. Yes. Oh, I'm Jerry too. In case you're wondering. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be chilling. Well, I'm really excited to be talking to you. All of Mary's stories on Instagram and everything make you out to be really funny, and you've totally delivered already. So I'm really excited to have you on.
Okay.
All right, here we go. We're going. Are you ready?
Yep.
Are you ready? Okay, here we go. So the whole point of this is just to tell me your story. I just want to hear about how you knew that God was calling you to marriage and all of that. So we're going to start. I always ask the same questions. Okay. So I'll go through my list. Sometimes you hit them when you're telling the story, and if not, I'll jump back in and make sure I get the things covered that my listeners have come to expect. So, how did you know that you were called to marriage?
Do I get to wrap that into my story, or is that a separate question?
You can wrap it into your story.
Okay.
Do you want to just tell your story?
That would be best.
Okay, I'm going to let him tell his story. Go. Okay. So tell your story.
So,
Jerry, where do we start in your story?
So I met Mary in 1986, which is, I think, 7 presidents ago.
That's a really impressive thing to know.
I know.
Is it actually 7 presidents ago?
Let's see.
I don't think I can do that math. You have to know who did double terms.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, about 7. It was when Reagan was president, so we'll go with that. So it was the spring of my junior year at the Naval Academy. So the spring of your junior year, one of the big social events is the ring dance, right? Which is the first time that as a junior you're allowed to wear your class ring.
Okay.
So it is it's like the social event of the season, and you go to the ring dance date. You have a date to go to the ring dance date. However you can get a date, you go to the ring dance. If you have to, you invite your cousin, you invite your, roommate's sister, your roommate's cousin, whatever it is. So I needed a ring dance date. So one dark and stormy night in 1986, I was going to go out into town and perhaps imbibe a little bit with my friends. But I said, I'm going to go to Dahlgren Hall first, because my buddy said he's going to be there with his girlfriend and she might bring some friends with him. Perfect. So my buddies are like, come on, let's go out to Reardon's. And for all my shipmates and classmates, we all know what Reardon's is. I said, I'll meet you there later. So I went to Dahlgren Hall, and there was my buddy, Ray, who was sitting there with his girlfriend and these 2 other girls. Now, they'd all come as a group. Mary can tell her side of the story. They all came as a group. Mary was strangely billed as the adult supervision of that group. I'm not really sure how that...
How did that come up? Who told you that?
This came out later as we were comparing.
You didn't know going in which one was the DD. You were
I didn't know which. Yeah, exactly. So So I introduced myself, and so Christy, who was the other girl, she was supposedly, can I do air quotes because I'm on camera? She's supposedly my date, although I didn't know she was my date.
Oh, so you had someone that they had chosen for you.
Well, apparently they did. They didn't tell me about it. But
how are you supposed to know?
Well, Ray was not the most socially graceful person. We'll just say that. So, I'm like, okay, we're here. We'll dance. So I got up to dance with Christy. Now, I don't want to sound prejudiced or anything, but Christy was about 5'2". And it was a little awkward to slow dance because you're like slow dancing like this.
How tall are you?
Well, back then, before life shrank me, I was about 6 feet. So
it's a lot of inches.
So that didn't work so well. But I was polite. I danced with her. She sat back down. Then I asked Mary to dance. Now, Mary's 5'9", and of course, she wore 2-inch heels.
Naturally. I love it.
So she was like perfectly my height. And she was dressed like a school teacher. So she had, I do remember this, right? Guys, you say you don't remember this, but I do remember this. She had on a skirt and a white blouse and about 4 pounds of hairspray.
It was the 80s.
It was the 80s. So I think they walked through they just spray it up in the air and walk through it like teenage boys did in the early 2000s with Axe, right? Remember the Axe body spray?
I was like 11.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, that makes me feel better. Anyway. So I met, so we started dancing, and I was trying to be humorous, and I think I told a lot of cow jokes because I'm from Oklahoma. So
are you really? I'm from Texas. We didn't talk about this in advance.
Yes.
Where in Oklahoma are you from?
I was born and raised north of Tulsa.
Oh my gosh, my dad's from Tulsa and my mother-in-law too. Okay, sorry. I don't get to edit anything out.
Have you ever considered switching to decaf?
I only drink decaf. Isn't that amazing?
That's scary, actually. A little scary, not going to lie. But anyway, so I started telling cow jokes, dad jokes, whatever, and she thought I was funny. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. So we ended up spending the rest of the evening together. And it was a great evening. So at the end of the evening, we came out of Dahlgren Hall to the back of the hall, and there's some steps there. Funny thing is, like 20 years later, we had pictures taken on those steps. The exact same steps where we had our first kiss, because her friend took my cover off. It's not a hat, by the way, just reminding her it's a cover. Put it on Mary's head, which is the tradition is when you put on a midshipman's cover, they get a kiss. So we kissed awkwardly, like two guppies, I think. Yeah, like years later, she's like, did I kiss like a fish that night? I said, sweetheart, we both kissed like a fish last night because it was really awkward and we were both like totally self-conscious. But it was good. It was the best fish kiss ever.
It's the cutest story ever. I love these details.
So after, they went off. I sent her, she still has it. I sent her a Garfield postcard because, of course, there was no text, internet, any of that highfalutin technology. You had banks of payphones. Don't ask me what my parents said about their phone bill when I started dating her. Like, son, you know how much I'm paying on your phone bill every month? Like, Dad, you realize how much I'm saving sending me to college? Just saying.
They're coming out ahead still.
Mm-hmm. Oh, way. So I called her up. Called her up and I said, would you, like to come on a date the following weekend? Well, her mom was going to the, Walk the Bay Bridge thing or whatever that they used to do. Surely it's all pre-pandemic, but they used to, the Bay Bridge that goes across from Annapolis over to the other side, the eastern shore there. They had a walk like,
okay,
hey, let's go have some fun, walk a bridge. Yeah. So we went to, so we had like a 4-hour date while her mom took some of her brothers and sisters on the bridge. So we went to Mass. That was her deal. It was Sunday morning, so we had to go to Mass. I said, okay, fine, we'll go to Mass. Now, I was Lutheran at the time.
I know, I was about to say, we had to go to Mass because you weren't Catholic.
I wasn't Catholic. I was Lutheran. But I said, okay, if that's what we got to do, that's what we got to do. So we went to Mass, and, I'm at my first Mass, and I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty similar to the Lutheran service, obviously except that Eucharist thing. But I said, but then I'm like, wow, you guys really do the Catholic aerobic things. So my Catholic friends were like talking about Mass as, stand up, sit down, fight.
That's accurate.
Yeah. So we went to Mass and then we went to breakfast. And then after that date, I said, okay, so do you have a stupid question. I said, do you have a formal dress? And she's like, why? I said, well, we have the spring formal coming up. And would you like to go to spring formal with me? Now, this was a test because ring dance was coming up. So I'm like, this could be a ring dance date, but let's give her a test.
I love that you took it so seriously. Your ring dance date.
It was a highly proficient military operation. We had to have a ring dance date.
Okay.
So we had her come down. We went to ring dance. That's the first time I met her parents. Now, both of her parents were in the Navy during Vietnam. So her father, who was big guy, came up to me, introduced himself. It's like, hi, I'm Joseph Green. I was in the Navy. I know what you're thinking. Not with my daughter. And I went, sir, very nice to meet you, sir. I totally respect your daughter, sir. And her mom was like, now, Joseph, don't intimidate the young man. And he goes, and just remember, her mom was in the Navy too, and she's a better shot than I am. I'm like, family lore. So she was my ring dance date, and she was a fabulous ring dance date. She had her motherhood back then because very few of the other dates knew how to like formal dance.
Oh, but she did.
How to go to a formal event, right? So she was helping them with their corsages. She was telling them what to do to get through the receiving line. And, she was like, had her little den mother. And all my friends are like, go Mary. Because they're like, great. So, our dates won't look like they don't know what they're doing, even though they don't. So anyway, so she took care of that. So we started dating. And for my last year and a half at the academy, and of course she was everybody's mom, totally in charge of things. She used to take charge of our tailgaters because, as men, we don't tailgate well. So my friends would give her the keys to their car. She'd go out, start getting everything set up. So by the time we got out of the football game, the fire was going, the food was set out, and like, okay, boys, you can cook the meat. Everything else is done. Great, thanks, Mayor.
So everyone loved her.
Oh, everybody loved her. Well, when we go back to class reunions, more people remember her than me because,
that is so cute.
Yeah. They're like, Mary, you remember when we did da-da-da-da? I said, hey, I was there too. Well, yeah, but, Mary did da-da. I said, I was there too. But okay, we'll go with that. So, we dated, and then I spent my first about 9 months after graduation, I was at the Pentagon waiting to start flight school. So I got to enjoy sort of my, officer and a gentleman's summer because I was an ensign. I had a really cool car. I had a cute girlfriend, and we just enjoyed life. And I guess at that point, I wouldn't go so far as to say I formally considered, what did you call it? Discerning marriage. But I knew that she was the one, right? Because it was just, I always want to, if I wasn't with her, I was thinking about the next time I was going to be with her. And then when I was going to be with her, I'm like, oh, gee, how much more time do we have? Because, I have to take her back home because, her dad was, yes. It's like, son, I know you're an ensign and all, but yes, sir, I know we were a little late. Sorry about that, sir.
Did you call him sir forever because he had also been in the Navy?
No, once we got engaged, then we would go out on the back porch with cigars and whiskey, and he would start telling Navy stories. And then after I got back from my first deployment, then I could tell Navy stories, and then we were like buds because we could, smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and tell Navy stories. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
More an even playing field.
We're on an even playing field. So, so the fall, let me think of the timeline. The fall of 1987, I came up from flight school.
And how old were you?
No, let's see. I would have been almost 23.
Okay.
Young, very young. We got married very young, which is probably a good thing. So I came home, came up to visit her for Christmas that year. So this is the 1980s in a nutshell, right? So I'm like, what are we going to do tonight? Oh, well, I promised Mr. and Mrs. Hannon that I babysit their kids. Do you want to come? And I'm like, excuse me. So these people are going to let you and your Navy ensign boyfriend babysit their kids in their house alone while they're gone. She's like, yeah. And I said, I'm in. So there we were. We're babysitting the kids. And I think she was giving me a tryout too because,
I bet so.
We had to read stories. We had to feed them. We had to put them to bed.
Good job interview.
Yes.
How good is he with these kids?
Oh, yeah. So then I had bought a ring. Now, this is one of the family lores. I bought the ring, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Bought it on sale. but it looked like Princess Di's ring.
Oh, yeah, with the sapphire?
With the sapphire. So it was
Gorgeous.
acceptable, and it was on sale. So,
I'm a very frugal person. You will never hear me saying anything about buying things on sale.
So
I
it's
think
like
it's
a
very
win-
prudent start to your financial life.
Right.
Well done, Jerry.
so
I like that.
It was a win-win.
Perfect.
So this is a Friday night. So back in the 80s, on Friday night, was this TV show called The A-Team. Right? Remember the A-Team? You probably don't because you weren't born in the 80s. Never
I
mind.
was born in 89. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Anyway.
Barely.
So this
I
is
barely
the
made it.
original A-Team with George Papard and Mr. T. So we are watching the TV show. All the kids have been put to bed. Watch the TV show. And I sort of sneak the ring out. And I go, now, of course, I was non-traditional, which she reminds me of all the time. And I said, would you do me the honor of being the mother of my children? And she's like, well, she started laughing. And I'm like, not the reaction I expected. And I said, she's like, well, don't we need to get married first? And I said, well, yeah, that's implied. And she's like, yes. And on the TV behind me, because I had this perfectly timed, George Papard is going, I love it when a plan comes together. And that is our family legend. So,
Well done. Did you get on your knee or no?
I was on my knee. Well, I was sitting on the floor, so I just kind of rolled over on my
perfect.
knees
And you
because
just
she was sitting on the couch. Yeah.
Perfect.
So that was our engagement story. So yeah.
So you knew that she was the one you wanted to marry because the way that time played into it. Like you were thinking about her when she wasn't there. And then when you were with her, you were like dreading when you had to take her back. Like that was really kind of the big thing that pushed you to be like, I want to marry this girl.
Right. Well, and she also, I'll be honest because we're on the, she did inspire me to be better than myself.
Oh, I love
First
that.
of all, she inspired me to dress better. All of my friends are like, Jerry, you dress so much better now that you're dating Mary. I said, yes, because our first 3 dates, we went to the Polo outlet and
Oh my gosh.
and bought
She bought you
clothes
clothes.
because she's like, you cannot wear your Oklahoma Sears outfit out with me. And I'm like, what's wrong with my pearl button shirt and my cowboy boots? She's like, we're in Maryland. We are not in Oklahoma. Yeah.
So you dress really well. Okay.
Oh, yes. All my friends noticed that. Yes. They also noticed,
love
Jerry,
it.
Jerry, you seem so much calmer and happier now. You must be going to see Mary this weekend. I said, yes. And then they're like, hey, Jerry, say hi to the wife and kids this weekend. Because it was just kind of my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So you were 23 when you proposed. How quickly, like how long were you engaged before you got married?
So we were engaged a year,
Okay.
Which was basically driven by the date we could get the chapel, right? Because we
Okay,
were
that
going to
makes
get married at the chapel. So we either had to get married in like 9 months or a year and a half. And I'm like, yeah, no, that ain't going to work. We're getting married in 9 months. So I asked her to marry me in December of 87. We got married in August of 88. Now, neither one of us really had any clue what being married actually meant, right? I mean, I'll be honest. I'm going to say that a lot. I figured it was like, playing house and having sex, right? Which totally was not how it turned out. But we married young enough that we were young, stupid, and naive, so we didn't know ahead of time
Sure.
what would happen, which is probably a good thing.
Sometimes the Lord
Yeah.
allows you to not know what
Right.
hard things are coming. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to say yes to them.
Exactly.
And then there's mercy abounding,
Right.
when you realize what you need to say sorry for and you have the courage to do it.
Right.
There's beauty
Exactly.
and richness.
Exactly.
Okay, so you weren't Catholic, and I don't think I processed that when I was prepping for this, that you converted. Like, I know I'd heard that in Mary's books. Like, I knew
Yeah.
I'd heard that, but I hadn't processed it.
So this was one of the discussion things early on. And I guess if you ask her parents later, like much later, they would have said this was the thing that concerned us the most, right? Because he was Lutheran and you were Catholic. But the one thing we did, so we had like the world's shortest marriage prep. We had about half an hour with our priest. That was it. Bad plan. Don't ever do that. Go through the full thing. Learn all the things, discuss all the things, talk all the things. Will save you a lot of pain. And
all of my
agony.
people know I'm very passionate about this. You all know that.
Yeah. So I actually came up, I guess it was in the spring of 88, quickly to see the priest that was marrying us. We sat down in his office for like 3 or 4 hours. And basically the only thing that he was concerned about is I signed the piece of paper that says we would raise the kids Catholic. So we talked about that. And I said, I'm a very practical person. I said, I'm expecting to be gone a lot at sea. So if you want to raise the kids Catholic, I'll support you in that. I mean, I said, at the time, I'm like, Catholic and Lutheran, they're not that different. They're pretty close.
Were you practicing Lutheran, or were you just like, did you just like identify as Lutheran, but you didn't
I
really
went
go
to
to church? You did go to church.
I
Okay.
did go to church. I went to church.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I was like a, rabid Lutheran or anything.
Okay.
I didn't sit around and, quote the 95 Theses or, talk
That's
about,
fair.
nailing the door at Württemberg or anything.
That's fair. Would you say you knew Christ in that season, or did you like meet him later as part of your journey to Catholicism?
Well, okay, so we'll talk about that. We'll
Okay.
dive into that. So we'd been married, higher math, 10 years when I got out of the Navy.
Okay, so you were in your early 30s.
So I was in 1998, so I would have been 34.
Okay. You had your babies.
Had our babies, started going through all the stuff that we went through that I'm sure Mary will talk a lot more about in her podcast. But I got out of the Navy, settled in Northern Virginia, and started at a parish. Now, this was in November of 1998. So the parish had just started their RCIA. They start their RCIA in like September, I think. So as my wife likes to say, the little children shall lead us. So I'd gone to mass with my wife for years, when I was home from sea or whatever. And, and of course, Jonathan had done his first communion there when we were in Little Creek, Virginia in 1996 when I was on the Enterprise. And, so she and Jonathan would go up and get communion, and I'd sit there in the pew with Courtney. So my son has a tendency to speak his mind. So he comes up. So we're coming out of St. Mary of Sorrows, which is our parish there in Northern Virginia, on a Sunday. And he goes, "Dad, why don't you come up and have communion with us?" He's like, and I said, being very logical, my son was very logical even back then. I said, "Well, son, I'm not Catholic. I'm Lutheran, so I don't go up." And he's like, "Well, why aren't you Catholic?" And I said, "Well, son, I'm Lutheran," and blah 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 blah. And he stopped in the middle of the parking lot Sunday after Mass, very dangerous place to be, kind of like standing on the Indianapolis 500 racetrack.
It is.
And he goes, and he puts his hands on his hip, just like my mother does. So genetics are cool. Puts his hands on his hip, stomps his foot, like my mother. And he's like, "Well, Dad, that's Jesus. Why don't you want Jesus?" Oh. And I went, "Okay, fine." And my wife, for the first time in her life, said absolutely nothing. She just stood there and watched. And she kind of tilted her head a little. And she goes, "Ooh, checkmate." I'm sure that was her inside voice. So the next week I said, "All right, fine, I'll go to RCIA and see what this is all about." So I went to RCIA, and we had a couple of really fantastic priests that did RCIA with us. So I started asking them questions because, I hadn't really studied Lutheran doctrine. So I wasn't, I'd been confirmed and all that, but that was, many, many years before. So as I started getting into, the Catholic faith and what the church teaches and believes, I'm like, this makes a lot of sense.
Very logical person.
Very, very logical person. And I came into the church in Easter of 1999. And that's, when I started, I guess, my faith journey, part deux. And still on it.
Oh my gosh. What a cool story. So knowing what you know now, obviously you're a very different person than you were back then.
Yeah, I have less hair now.
There you go. I was meaning more like the faith piece, but sure.
Yeah,
also that. But I know, well, actually, no, I have no idea what you're going to say this. What if you could go back and give yourself some advice when you were 22, 23 years old and you were dating this cute girl and you were thinking about marrying her? What advice would you give yourself?
I think the biggest thing was go through real marriage prep, because we had so many issues with communicating about, as I'm sure she'll tell you more about, money, sex, child raising, dealing with our parents. And
it's a big deal.
And I think the biggest thing is I like to think that if we had done a proper marriage prep, that some of the issues that had to come out later painfully in the midst of a crisis, we might have addressed earlier. And, it could have, postponed our wedding potentially if we had to work through these wounds, baggage, whatever word you want to use. Because this is what we tell couples is like, let's be brutally honest. Everybody brings their past into their marriage, right? Everybody brings their wounds, their hurts, their baggage, whatever you want to call it. And people are like, well, maybe marriage will solve these. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way, cowboy. Getting married to someone.
You say that exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter how much you love them, they love you. You have to address your, what is it that psychologists say, your inner child or whatever.
It's true. It's a real thing, your inner
it's
child.
It's a real thing, right? So, when we got married, we both had our vision, right? Like I was going to be an admiral. She was going to be the admiral's wife. We'd have our perfect little kids in their perfect little Catholic school uniforms. They would go to the perfect little Catholic school. Yeah, God laughed, right? God laughed. And, but, looking back over the coming up on 35 years that we have been married, things have a way of working out exactly the way they should.
Amen.
Not the way you want,
right?
Just to be clear.
Right.
But the way they should. And,
the Lord is so merciful in that space. Absolutely.
Sometimes merciful with a 2x4 upside the head.
Hey, sometimes that's what mercy looks like. Sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah, I know. I'm reminded of, who was it? Elisha that went out in the desert and says, God, I just want to die here. And God says, here, eat some bread, drink some water, take a nap. You'll feel better.
It's true. It's pretty much exactly right.
You're right. A snack, a nap, and you're ready to go. See, God knows exactly what you need. So that's kind of how it was for us. When we tell our story to people, they're like, how did you stay married to each other? And like, well, to be brutally honest, sometimes you just reach a point where, nobody else is going to put up with your guff but your wife or your husband, right? I mean, it's true, right? Right? I mean, we get to the point. We're not quite completely telepathically linked. No, but we're pretty darn close, right? You can be, have you ever gone to this party that you really didn't want to go to with your husband? And you just kind of get the eye signals of, please come rescue me from this person who's talking my leg off because I can't get it out of here. So come rescue me.
It's usually the opposite. I'm the really extroverted one and my sweet husband is the one sending me eyes like,
right, exactly. Rescue me. Come get me, right? But you don't have to say a word. You just kind of look at each other.
There's
right?
a look, crazy eyes.
Right? Yeah. Like when we do marriage prep, one of the things I tell the young men, I'm like, let me tell you the biggest pitfall of a young married man. Said the first time that your wife takes you clothes shopping, if you haven't already been, right? So then she comes out of the dressing room and you're sitting there and she goes, do these jeans make my butt look big? Right? Your answer has got to be no. But it's got to be no very quickly. Because if you hesitate at all, you're lost. Because they'll think, wait, you had to think about that for a second, right? And I'm like, and it doesn't really, it's whatever they come out in, right? You have to be prepared for that. And they look at me and they're like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, trust me. It's a test, right? I said, now after 34 plus coming up on 35 years, I don't have to say anything. I just go, that's interesting. She's like, you don't like it, do you? And I think, And if I raise the eyebrow, then she's like, no, you don't like it. But I don't have to say anything. I just go,
It's a lot of clothes shopping you guys have done to develop that signal that you guys have. That's hilarious.
Yeah, communication over the years, right? Yeah. So, but it took us a long time to build those communication skills because we didn't understand when we were first married. Like, for example, the other thing we talk to couples about is what we call the rules of Fight Club, right? Because we're like, okay, now, have y'all had a fight yet? And they're like, oh, no, I love him. He's so... Well, wait, aren't you planning a marriage and a wedding and you still haven't had fights? But they're like, oh, I love him. We don't have fights. I'm like, yeah, you're lying. I said, every couple fights. The only ones who don't fight, they're either psycho or they're lying because every couple fights. And I said, and you have to learn how to do that. And they're like, what do you mean learn? I said, oh, there are rules to Fight Club. And I said, and it's not the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. You have to know how to have a disagreement or an argument with your spouse. And we stepped them through that. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's really good. Like, yeah, ask me how I know.
We learned the hard way.
We learned
about
the hard
those 2x4s.
Yeah, we learned the hard way. And that's, a lot of that is what we tell couples about marriage these days. They're like, yeah, pretty much anything you can mess up, we've done. Anything that you can sin, we've done. We're not coming to you as the what is it? My wife calls them holy Hannahs of, the perfect marriage. Never, no, wrong. We have experience. Experience comes from wisdom. Wisdom comes from bad decisions. And we've made plenty of those. So we are very wise because we have made very many bad choices.
But there's seriously so much beauty in that wisdom because it gives people so much hope. Like when you go through the suffering and you come out the other side.
Yeah.
I am personally very inspired by stories like that. So I'm so grateful y'all are willing to share yours.
Well, and that's the other thing we have to tell them. The other thing we tell them that we've definitely learned is, marriage is not dating, right? When you're dating someone, you're like, let's be out here on your best behavior. You never leave
Yes.
socks laying, not that you're living together or anything, but you pick up after yourself. You don't make a mess. You're always super polite, super well dressed. I'm like, that's great, but that's not marriage. Marriage is like one of you just got spit up by the baby and you're trying to go to mass and you're like, can I put a jacket on to kind of cover that up?
Ignore the smell.
Ignore the
It's fine.
smell, right? It's a relationship, and relationships can be messy and relationships can be painful. But, at the end of the day, you have to remember, we tell them when it's really bad, had a big fight, or you're just whatever, tired, the baby's not sleeping, whatever. Why did you marry this person? What, ultimately and always draws you back to them. Now, for Mary, it's her chicken fried steak. I'll be clear with you. It's chicken fried steak.
That's a good motivator.
It is an extremely
You gotta
good.
eat.
You got to eat, right? So, for her, it's the fact that I bring her a cup of coffee every morning.
That's so cute.
Every morning. Even if we've had
So
a fight
cute.
the night before, I bring her a cup of coffee every morning. As much for self-preservation as because I love her much, because I know how she is before she's had her coffee.
But still, it's
But,
so sweet.
it's those little things, right? And when people are, in the midst of, 4 kids under 5 or 5 kids under 4, however that goes.
Either. Both would be
Either
really
way,
hard.
right? And they're like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. I'm like, yeah, you can, trust me. You know why? Because we've quite honestly done worse, right? We've been through worse. This is, my wife says, this is a season. It's a season. You'll get through it.
Amen.
You just got to hang together. And, the other thing we tell them is you have to remember with your spouse, it's you and them against the world. You're a team. And at the end of the day, they're your wingman. And you never, ever leave your wingman. Right?
That is a perfect place to end on. Well done. Way to land that plane. Well done. Thank you so much. I
you're
really,
very
really
welcome.
appreciate your willingness to tell your story. And I'm super delighted. It was a bit of a lovely surprise for me when I realized you weren't Catholic when you were discerning marriage. So I love that perspective because I know that I have listeners who aren't Catholic and I know I have listeners who are dating people who aren't Catholic. And I think there's something so beautiful about
that's
your
another
story.
one
So
of the
thank you so much.
That's another one of the things you have to talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a deal. And when we had couples where they weren't both Catholic, or maybe they weren't even strong Catholics, that's something that you've got to think about. But no, at our wedding, we were covered, right? So we were married by the Catholic priest. There was a Protestant minister that was doing the wedding behind us. So he gave us a blessing too. And then like a rabbi wandered in, it's like that bar, welcome to that bar. There's a priest, a preacher, and a rabbi. We had them all at our wedding. So all we needed to do was like throw the glass and we would have been covered
Good to go.
pretty much, from all the children of Abraham, right?
Oh
we
my
had them all.
Gosh, you crack me up.
So,
Thank you. I so appreciate it. And
no, you're welcome. It was fun.
yes, and thank you all of you for being here. I hope you laughed as much as I did. You're so funny. I love it. And thank you again. I think I just said that. I get really excited and then my words get all mixed up in my brain. Thanks for being here. I love having you. I'm honored to be a part of your journey. And until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.